What's up, guys? New day, new car, new video. We've got ourselves a R34 4-door. It has been built, turboed, manual converted. Just having a look underneath here. We've got big box. Looks like R33 box to me. So at least it's got the big 25 box in it. I'm not sure whether the build, it was actually built out of a factory turbo or whether it was built as a DE Neo. Obviously, it doesn't really matter except for the fact that the aspirated head has slightly smaller ports, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We've done turboed DE plus T Neos before and they've always performed really, really well. So no issues there. But anyway, it's come here. There was a few issues with it. It basically is just on the new hot side. He asked us to fit new injectors and then it needs a retune. So new hot side is a Pulsar G377. No, sorry. I do that every time. I don't know why I do that every time. I think it's because that's the turbo I recommended to him. So, but anyway, it ended up with a GTX 3582 is what's on it. So plenty of turbo. There's plenty of turbo to party. Pretty glad we just had a look because he didn't know at the time when he dropped it off whether it was big box or little box because it's been converted. Just having a look, it looks like to be the big box, which we're glad because it's got enough turbo to send either of these gearboxes to the moon, really. So yeah, GTX Pulsar 3582, which is plenty of power, plenty of turbo. Bo just fitted new 1000cc Bosch long pintle injectors, just your standard 980cc Bosch injectors. They're a great value for money injector for this sort of setup. And at the moment, the boys are just going through basically just fault finding. It's got a Haltech Platinum plug-in, and we're trying to get a fuel pressure gauge sender in there somewhere because it's still running the standard rail, which means standard regulator. It's got an upgraded fuel pump, but with the standard regulator and the standard lines and rail, there's no way for us to see what fuel pressure is doing, and there's no wideband in it. And given there's no wideband, oh, there is a wideband. Oh, is it a Haltech wideband? WB01? Oh, look at that. That's awesome. Anyway, more you don't know. I'm really glad that that's there because that makes tuning it way faster and way better. So that's awesome. But anyway, still we would like to get a fuel pressure gauge in there if we can, or sensor in there if we can, but we'll see what happens. I thought we had a spare Haltech expansion harness for the Platinums, which is a little like 8-pin plug. It's hard to explain, but I thought we had one, but we don't by the looks of things. So we may not have a choice. We may not have the pins and the hardware we need to do that. But the boys have found a few sensors that are faulty, not getting power. They're supposed to be getting some issues with the install on the Haltech, whoever crimped the original expansion harness that's in there. So we've got a few dramas that the boys are trying to sort out as far as getting sensors and everything else working. Not only that, but where they ran the turbo feed for the the oil feed for the turbo, it's run directly up through the new high mount 6-boost manifold, like between the runners, and that's not going to happen. So there's like a few.
It's still there.
Still there.
We left it there.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Are you gonna leave it there? Or are you gonna remake it?
No, leaving it there.
Oh, okay.
Problem it had.
I didn't tell them we'd remake it. But
it was leaning over and just leaning against the runner.
Yeah.
So all we did was straighten it up and ran it up the middle and just heat sleeved it.
You're gonna be right.
There's actually a fair bit of space there.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, we'll just keep an eye on it. So basically, just sorting out the issues that needs to be sorted out before it goes on the dyno and gets tuned. But looking forward to this thing. It's a really cool car. I'm a big fan of 4-doors. All 4-doors. I'm a big fan of 34s. I really like 4-doors. I really like the work Kiwami wheels. Yeah, it's a nice tidy little 34. It's a nice tidy little RB. So yeah, excited about the fact we've got the big box. We've got plenty of turbo and injector to send this thing. So yeah, and from what I can tell, engine's pretty built. We should be pretty right to send it as far as the donk goes. Although it did end up still with stock cams. We talked about his next mod, apart from doing a forward-facing plenum so that it's easier to work with and stuff, is going to be drop-in cams. I'm a big fan of the Tomei Pond cams, but yeah, whatever, drop-in cams, which just really help with these things. I'm sure once upon a time I would have been able to tell you just from looking at it whether this was DET Neo head or DE Neo head or CS2 head. Yeah, I'm sure once upon a time I knew that and remembered that, but I definitely do not anymore. So yeah, Pulsar, 6-boost, high mount, still standard intake. That's what we're working with. So Bo's just fitting the catch can, and yeah, boys are just going through sorting out sensors and things like that. But get this Mac valve hooked up, get it all working, and get it on the dyno and get it pumping. Did you end up taking the water lines out, or? Yep. So water's been removed.
They were blocked. Both blocked.
Yep.
With rust.
Yep.
Did manage to clear them out eventually, which was a waste of time in the end because we couldn't reroute them anyway.
Yep.
That would work. So
Anyway,
It's gone.
yeah, so we're just running it no water, which we've said it before a million times, but the water that goes through these cores, the main function for the water through the core is to continue to draw heat after shutdown to stop oil in the core caking. So it's not 100% necessary. As long as you idle the car down properly and don't do like a real hot shutdown or something, you're generally not going to have that much of a problem. So yeah.
Don't use a turbo timer.
Don't use a turbo timer.
Please.
Throw them in the bin. But yeah, that's the main function for the water, is just to cool the core and to continue cooling the core after shutdown. So yeah, as long as you are aware of that, you don't particularly need to have water through them. But anyway, yeehaw. Let's get this thing sorted, get it on the dyno, and see what it she do. All right, so we've got the IoT sensor working. That's all sorted now. Got that wiring sorted for the IoT. So now it's just a matter of the ISCV, plumbing that back into the intake. So Rex has just welded a bar that we've got here onto the intake, so now we can plumb in the ISC instead of it just being to Atmo. And once it's on, that's sort of all we need to sort out from here, as far as I'm aware, for tuned, and we can get it tuned. There's not really any way to get a fuel pressure sensor in it that's going to be simple and easy with the parts we've got here. So we're just going to see how it goes. Obviously, if it has fuel pressure dramas, it's something we're going to have to look at. But if it doesn't, well then, hey, it's something we could potentially avoid. And yeah, the boys sorted out the oil feed, as we talked about yesterday. That's all sorted. So all that's going to be left is an actual intake for the turbo, which I don't know, there could actually be one in the car. I haven't even looked through the car yet, but it's not really something that we particularly 100% need just to get it dynoed and tuned. So yeah, that's what we're dealing with. Guys, surprise, surprise, we've got fuel pressure dramas. So we've just got a gauge jimmied up into the fuel line so that I can keep an eye on this while Rex does a run. But yeah, fuel pressure dramas, surprise, surprise. So doing well though, 400 horsepower at the wheels on only 15 pounds. Considering this thing is stock cams, that's quite impressive for that boost and that power. But anyway, get its fuel pressure issue sorted. Now, my suspicion is that big pump, probably no upgraded wiring. My suspicion is that, yeah, we're just running out of amperage in the wire. But anyway, do a bit of fault finding and see. So as you can see from that gauge, it sort of seemed to be fine in that part of the feed. So I sort of had this idea that maybe in the feed it's keeping pressure, but on the rail side, maybe there's some sort of restriction after that first pulse dampener and it's dropping pressure in the rail, but not in the feed. I don't know. But by all accounts, that it looked fine. We actually tried another gauge, so 2 different gauges, same result, looked fine. So we've ended up, what we've done is got the spare regulator that we had out the back. We chucked that in the return after the stock regulator. So that we can basically just make sure that pressure is coming up as we expect from the manifold, from the boost coming up, make sure the boost reference is working as far as keeping pressure up. So we've still got our gauge in the feed line, but we've now got a aftermarket regulator with its own gauge in the return so that we can reference both, try and see what's happening on either side of the regulator and each side of this rail and try and figure out what is going on here, because Like if you actually look at the AFR from the dyno, as you can see, it's all over the place. And as Rex was saying, this is not in the EMAP. So whatever's going on here, there's something going on as far as the actual fuel in and fuel flow and rail and things is concerned. It's not in the VE map. So yeah, got some looking out to do. See what we can find out. All right guys, well there you have it. So the gauge that's in the regulator that's in the return line just plummeted, while the gauge that's in the feed line kept at a constant. So there's something going on, there's some sort of restriction as far as that standard pulse damper in line in the feed.
Yeah,
and something, yeah. So it's keeping pressure up to there, which is fine, I guess, but afterwards it's, so whatever's going, it's some sort of restriction in the stock rail. So I've not really heard or researched or known much about these stock rails being a restriction or a problem, but evidently we're having an issue. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the whole rail. Like, yeah, maybe if we can remove...
Start with deleting that. Because
yeah,
like
if we can delete that, perhaps that'll fix our problem. But yeah, there's definitely something going on there and it's not happy. So we'll see if there's a way that we can just remove that without too much drama and give that a test run. If not, I suppose the other obvious option is go to an aftermarket rail. But see if we can avoid that, because I don't think Bo wants to take the manifold back off again. What do you reckon, Bo? Hey, you know that job you just did that sucked? Can you do it again?
Hell no.
Bo's going to be sick on that day.
Yeah.
Oh, who's going to get employee of the month now, Bo?
Not me.
So we just pulled that pulse damper off the rail and just hit the key and ran it into a bucket, and it is pretty free flowing. This built up maybe not even 10 psi, as that was just flowing straight into a bucket. So it doesn't appear that this is the restriction, but it definitely appears that it has to be some sort of restriction somewhere between here and through the rail back to here. Something in there is not doing its job and not happy and creating a bit of a choke point.
just gently try and get the fuel out. Sure doesn't feel restricted or blocked.
Alright guys, so what you just saw before is we took the pulse damp and the regulator off and then blew back through the rail just to make sure didn't seem like there was any obvious restrictions. But we've done a bit more testing now, same thing, just different fuel pressures, up this fuel pressure right up to like 4.5 bar, and the result is always the same. We're always keeping consistent pressure in the feed, and the pressure at the regulator is just dropping off hard, which means that between where this feed's taken from and the injectors, there is a restriction somewhere. And we're losing pressure at the injectors, but we're maintaining pressure in the feed, which means it's not a pump issue, it's not a filter issue, it's not a supply issue, there's some sort of restriction. Now, the way this rail works is it comes in through this pulse damper, it goes down, there's a little bit of rubber hose, it connects two hard lines before it goes into the rail, and then it comes back up the rail through this regulator and then back down around into our return here. Now, not worried about what's going on after the regulator, because if the restriction was on this side after the regulator and the injectors were seeing the same pressure this is, we wouldn't get the drop in AFRs, like we wouldn't get the big lean out. So the fact that we're getting the big lean out means that the restriction has to be somewhere between the feed and the injector, which means, yeah, it can only be either that little bit of rubber hose, or maybe there's a kink in the hard line somewhere along the line, or it is just an inherently flawed rail design. Now, I'm not super familiar with the stock rails because we've never really used them, but I have to imagine that it wouldn't be a restriction at 400 wheel horsepower and 98. I can't imagine that just the rail design is the problem. So I have to imagine there's something else going on. But that being said, for the amount of work it is to remove the plenum and get at the rail and everything else, I'll talk to the owner of the vehicle and see if he wants us to just put an aftermarket rail and an aftermarket reg in it and be done with it. That way it's done, don't have to worry about it again. So that's what I'd like to do. Yeah, that's the other thing, is then we can put the pressure sensor in and wire it into the ECU, which is what I wanted to do at the start. But anyway, that being said, as we've seen from here, depending on where the sensor ended up being, which we probably would have put it right where this is taken from most likely, because it's the most logical place, and it wouldn't have told us anything because this has told us that we're maintaining pressure at that point. So yeah, but either way, anyway, I digress. The point is that for the amount of work it is to pull the plenum off and get it back at the rail, if he wants to pay us to do that labor again, my personal recommendation would be to just, if we're doing that labor again, just put an aftermarket one in it and be done with it. So that's what I'm going to recommend, but ultimately it's up to him. Where we're at so far, like I said, 400 wheel horsepower at 15 pound is really, really good considering this is still stock cams. That's quite impressive. I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, must have a pretty good intercooler. Everything's working quite well. I'm pretty excited. Righto, boys and girls. So it is exactly as I expected. If we're going to be taking the plenum off again to do these injectors, the owner just wants to go aftermarket rail, aftermarket fuel pressure reg, etc. So that's what we're going for. That's what we're doing. So yeah, we'll order that, get it here, get that sorted out. I'm not going to be here for the next week. This is as an operation, so I'll be away for the next week. So hopefully the boys will have the parts they need and have this sorted by the time I get back. So hopefully we're here to see it. If not, I'll tune back in when I get back anyway and let you know what we're up to. But yeah, at the rate it's going with the boost and power we're at, I've got no doubts that we'll be able to make 500 wheel horsepower without really much drama, and the rest of the setup should all be capable of handling that. If we went to E85, I've got no doubt that this setup you'd just be able to get it to eat, particularly if we had some cams. So drop-in cams, E85, probably a forward-facing top half plenum, and this thing I reckon would just eat. But anyway, in the guise that it's in, I reckon 500 wheel horsepower is well and truly in the question and a capable goal. So that's what we'll shoot for. All right, guys, bloody love cars, love what we do. Anyway, so we got the new Raceworks rail and reg and everything on this thing, as you can see. FBR 6, new Raceworks rail, everything's sweet. So Bo did that, which was great. But now that we don't have a fuel blockage and are actually asking some fuel demand, it's got other fuel pressure problems, fuel supply issues. So obviously, while there was a restriction there was only so much fuel demand, or before it would just stop. There was only so much you could demand while the restriction was there. Now that it's gone, and we're actually asking it to do stuff, we're finding all the other issues with the fuel system. So first things first, that's what Bo's just emptied out of the filter. Look at that. Oh, look at all the crap in there. Anyway guys, if you're watching from home, just put a new fuel filter in before dyno day. It's a really cheap part, really cheap insurance, because dyno time by the hour is not cheap. So anyway, a new filter for sure. The other thing we realised when we started having a fault find and look into things was that they've just they've put a 525 in this thing with the stock wiring. They've done no wiring upgrades for the 525. Not only that, I'm not actually sure where this 525 came from, so I'll have to ask them about that, where it actually came from. But yeah, it's still got stock wiring to the actual bulkhead to the pump. So there's a few things that are probably working against us, and like sometimes on R33s and stuff where the battery's right next to the fuel pump hanger and you've only got like 400 mil of wire, you can get away with a lot smaller wire. But this 34, we've got battery up the front, which means that's most likely stock fuel pump wiring from the battery all the way to the back of the car, which for a 525 is probably not going to cut it. So yeah, it's been on the dyno again, found fuel issues again, and now we're this deep into trying to solve the rest of the fuel issues. So yeah, 90% of cars that come here for a tune, fuel supply problems. And there's a couple of things that are easy fixed, there's some things that are unforeseen, it's just unfortunate, but at the end of the day, it's all problems that we've got to end up dealing with. Righto guys, we've finally got big blown wags off the dyno for a minute to get some other stuff sorted. So the new fuel filter, and then the addition of obviously our fuel pressure sensor, which is now wired into the ECU, which is awesome. So it's got onboard fuel control or safeties, and then rewired the fuel pump all together. So ran a new 12 gauge wire from the battery all the way down through a relay obviously to the fuel pump, and a new trigger wire from the ECU directly to that relay to eliminate any possibilities of, you know, any control modules or PWM stuff that could or could not be going on. We don't know enough about these cars to definitively say, and that's the easiest way to just eliminate it. Now, we also did him a favor, and when we ran the 12 gauge from here down to the boot, we ran a second one. So second one is to support upgraded pumps in future if it ever ends up at that point where it's got like a surge tank with twin pumps or something. There's two 12 gauges there ready to go, so he'll thank us for that in future if he ever gets there. So tune's going pretty well. Yeah, 430 I think it's made, but Rex is having issues at the moment. It's just not responding to duty cycle changes in the boost table, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on there and why that's happening. But yeah, it's cooking, it's going well, sounds strong, everything else is good. Finally sorted after many long weeks of chasing issues. So I'll also probably chuck in this video this car. So this is a S15 with just a VZ LS1 that showed up for a tune. I wasn't gonna make a video of it, but I may as well chuck it on this car, on this video, just in the interest of, I suppose, a little Jap car video for you guys. So this is a VZ LS1 cammed, built by a bloke in Toowoomba, and it got here for a tune and immediately bricked an ECU. To eliminate the possibility of it being a wiring issue with the car, we actually set up a bench loom, and we had a spare VZ ECU which we tried to flash on our bench loom, and it did exactly the same thing. Got them sorted out, got them both back, tried it again, did the same thing, and that was after we talked to VCM about a solution. After VCM solutions didn't work, we tried just a completely new OS, and it wrote fine. So it appears that whatever the OS was that was on the car is corrupted in some way, or somehow corrupted, and yeah, that obviously was a problem. So new OS got it sorted, but that's three bricked ECUs later, having to unbrick them. Finally got an ECU, well, I finally got a tune written that failed the math properly, so the car would actually try and run and get some, you know, get it running so we could move it around, and it wouldn't hold any more than 25 psi of fuel pressure. So once we actually pulled the fuel pump out and inspected, what it was doing was the little pressure relief in the fuel pump, it had spat the little pressure relief ball out of the fuel pump, so it was just pissing fuel out of the pressure relief in the fuel pump and not actually making fuel pressure. So then we had to replace it with a new fuel pump, which we've now been waiting 3 weeks to arrive because of postage issues and another package going walkabout. So just replacing it with a little Raceworks 340 litre per hour. That's all this thing should need, just being a cammed LS1 on 98. So just a seat time car. But anyway guys, here's a good, between this car and this S15, is only a small example of cars that come here with fuel pressure dramas, and it's just getting ridiculous. It's getting beyond ridiculous. So we are working on restructuring how we are charging for these. It needs to be paid for properly for costing us the time that it costs, essentially. I understand, obviously, as enthusiasts, we understand and we sympathize that not all these problems are foreseeable. Not all these problems can be known by the owners before the cars get here, and a lot of them, they're not the owner's fault. Some of them are their work or different people's work. A lot of them aren't their fault at all, and like I said, not foreseeable. But at the end of the day, it's your car. You own the car, you bought the car, you built the car. It means you bought the car with its problems, you built the car with its problems, and the problems are then inherently yours to deal with and in turn pay for. Anyway, at the end of the day, as much as we sympathize, you know, these aren't our toys. We don't get to go and enjoy them. We're here to do work on them and provide a service. We're not the ones to get to go out on track and drift them and enjoy them. So it's certainly not fair that it should cost us our time. And you know, if you own the car, like I said, you bought it with its problems, and its problems are yours to deal with or pay for if we have to deal with them. And that's sort of just how we're trying to get this sorted. So yeah, like I said, we sympathize, we understand, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. We still have to be a business and make money and eat. And hopefully, if we are charging hourly rate for things like this, it will start to entice people to really, really dot their I's and cross their T's before they bring their cars here. Things like a $12 fuel filter, just put a new one in it. Before your dyno session, just put a new one in it. Because you don't want to be paying us dyno rates for hourly rate on a dyno to sort out your fuel filter and a lot of other issues you might have. So double check batteries, double check alternators are charging, double check fuel pumps are wired and plumbed correctly. Do little things like fuel filters. Make sure your starter's working. You know, all these little things. Dot your I's, cross your T's. Car will, you know, work better on the dyno and you won't get charged as much. Anyway, we just had a really shitty run with cars with problems over the past 3 weeks, and then piling on top of that, we've also had a lot of issues with postage the past few weeks, which has caused delays for all of the parts we needed to finish these cars. So like this thing, what Bo's doing there with that fuel pump for that. This thing, which same order. So all of these were waiting on parts from the same order, which went walkabout. We were waiting on for 3 weeks. They still haven't given us an update. I ended up just having to order the order again. But the Mighty Boy, the S15, this thing, that thing even, that, all were waiting on parts from one order that went walkabout. So anyway, it's just been a pretty crappy few weeks. So it's really forced us to look at how we're charging and what we're doing. Quick replumb of the macro, should be good to go. All right, and that's a wrap. Finally made 500, 511. That's a pretty good effort, I'd say, for this little car on 98. Obviously on the 85, I reckon it'd eat. The 85 would be mint. Yeah, easy. I'd say.
It's not limited.
Yeah, so I mean, RB25 forged. It's still stock cams. He was intending to put cams in it at some point. Hopefully he does that in future. But with cams and this 3582 on E85, this thing will eat. But for now, 500 is a good little number for a little 98 streeter. So yeah, that's that done. Finally, it's a long freaking road with this car. A few cars lately that have been a long road as far as just more and more issues. But anyway, that's that. So thanks for watching. Move on to the next, the S15. All right, so this is a nice side after the muck around this has been as well. But just moving it inside, Rex has realised that both thermo fans are actually wired back to front, so they're both pushing instead of pulling. So
That's much better.
had to change that to make sure both thermo fans are actually pulling, so that's better. Anyway, fingers crossed this thing's quick in and out now. Alright guys, so that was short-lived. We got it on the dyno, Rex started running it up. We got 102 that's dead, which for a drift car wouldn't normally stop us. Rex would normally be pretty happy just to go on with the tune. Worry about the O2 later on. But worse than that is the alternator's not charging, so we've got no voltage. So that's a good one. Yeah, check your alternators guys, check your starters, check all these things, batteries. Anyway, alternator's not charging. Hopefully it's something simple like the wiring's just incorrect, which we do see on aftermarket alternators a fair bit. It does happen, so hopefully it's something that simple. And hopefully we don't have to freaking order an alternator and have to wait for that, because that's going to put it off another week. Alright guys, well thankfully that actually was fairly successful. So what ended up happening, we thought screw it, we'll just put the GYS flash on it so that we can, from 240 volt, just give it the voltage it needs to get the tune done, and then we can give it back to them and tell them, hey, your alternator's this and that, whatever. But upon some investigation, we found that the alternator actually was charging, but the ECU is not seeing full charge. The ECU is just seeing battery voltage, not charge voltage. So I don't know what's going on there, but it's obviously the way they wired it, and there's the last thing we're doing is diving into wiring gremlins in a drift car that's been converted. That is just not happening. So Rex had to do a lot of work around basically just getting the injector dead times and stuff right with the voltage the ECU was seeing to try and get this kind of correct, which is still a bit weird. We reckon that these injectors are probably modified, have been modified or flowed, all the caps have been deleted. I don't know we don't know what's going on, but it was over-fueling like crazy. And what Rex was doing to tune it, without going into too much detail of how these ECUs actually calculate their fueling and timing, it was affecting the timing too much with what Rex was having to do. So we ended up having to sort of find another way to modify it enough that the injectors would work, but it's worked. 380 wheel horsepower, that's a really good result for what we understand standard head 241 LS1 combo. And also, as we always talk about, in converted cars, we generally find that these engines just don't perform as well as they do in Commodores. So given all that and how low this thing is and what the shaft angles must be like all of your drive shaft angles and everything.
Also have a look at the towing on the back top.
Yeah, the towing, like, yeah, there's a lot of things going on here. Yeah, there's a lot of things happening here that we would expect to take away from the final number. So for it to do 380 wheel horsepower the way it is quite impressive.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we're quite impressed by that.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, so a really good result in the end. Obviously, not stoked about the way we had to tune around it, but like I said, I expect that these injectors must be some sort of modified, and then whatever's going on with the ECU, not seeing charge voltage. Again, it's at the end of the day, we're here to supply service. Our service is to tune your car. Whether your car's ready for that service is not really up to us, and we will do our best to provide such a service. And that's what we've done, and that's what it is. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a drift car. It is what it is. Yeah, it's tuned. At the end of the day, it's tuned. Whether or not we are super stoked with the method of how it's done, at the end of the day, it's tuned and it's ready to go burn some tires, and it's going to be safe, and it's going to be happy to do so, especially with 380 horsepower and this sort of chassis. It's going to be good. Anyway,